What if I told you that the US isn't the only country with hidden debt discharge laws, but other countries hide it differently? Now, in this video, I'm going to break down how debt relief works in the UK, Canada, and Europe, and how their laws compares to the US system of discharge, trust structures, and administrative remedy. Now, I've studied global financial systems, international bankruptcy frameworks, and commercial code remedies, and I'm here to help you see the big picture most people never do. Now, before we dive into this video, make sure to like the video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Make sure to turn on those post notifications so that we can be at the top of the algorithm every single time we post a video. These are concepts that nobody is talking about, but a lot of people ask questions about this. So we about to really dive in. Now, what we're going to be talking about primarily today is how the U.S. frames debt discharge in comparison to other countries, specifically Canada, UK, and Europe. And the reason why I'm talking about Canada, UK, and Europe, because that's where most people kind of ask those questions. But more importantly, there's the aspect that the United States are more closely tied to those countries on a legal framework than, other countries. Okay. But there are some key differences. It's very similar, but the way that they do things are much differently. Okay. Another thing I want to highlight, this is not legal advice. This is not financial advice, whether you're from the UK, whether you're from Europe, the United States, whatever the case may be. I'm just talking about my findings and teaching you this for my educational purposes only. Do your own due diligence. Do not take everything that I say for face value, my baby. Now, one of the key things that I want to talk about or really just highlight is the difference, okay, and how they are the same, okay? So make sure you stay all the way to the end, okay? And I'm going to try to break this down as layman's as possible, because even these are some new concepts that I'm learning too, because I do focus on the United States side or the US side. And I decided, okay, let me do some due diligence on the other country side and see what I can find. And I found some stuff. So this may be more like a part 1 to this video. I may do a part 2. So bear with me. Okay. But y'all know first things first, I'm going to talk about the US, because help you guys understand how the US framework is going to be probably, more help you going to understand the difference. So let's just talk about the US, because that's what we know. All right, first things first, the U.S. frames debt discharge through the UCC, okay, through the Uniform Commercial Code. That's what we talk about in 100% of the videos. They also have the aspect of a trust structure and negotiable instruments, okay? So when we talk about promissory notes, coupon remittance, when we talk about, unconditional offers and things in that nature, this is what the United States operate under. They also operate under administrative remedies. Okay, a private process, okay, giving us a right to be able to do our own due process privately, utilizing things like coupon remittance and affidavits, or send a collection of presentments to solve and administer our own remedy. And then there are evidence of discharge through laws like 12 USC 411, okay, 15 USC 1692G, and 26 CFR code. And these are just a piece of it, but how they kind of just bury the discharge is more through the laws, okay, versus other countries, they bury it in other ways. All right, and we'll talk about that in a sec. I don't want to jump the gun here. Now, here are some of the concepts that the United States have on the debt discharge aspect. The first concept is the fact that promissory notes are treated as cash equivalents. So when we're talking about, the loan agreements are really just promissory notes, promissory notes. And promissory notes is a written promise from one party to the borrower to pay a debt to another party or lender, including interest and any other fees on a specified date or dates in the future. So if I go to the images and show you what a promissory note looks like, it's just as simple as this right above. You dig me? I mean, obviously there's many different templates out there, and you see a euro here. So you can create promissory notes in, the UK, Canada, things in that nature, but it does work a little bit differently. But this is a simple promissory note. I, Jay Monroe, do promise to pay city finance code the sum of 50,000. Repayment is to be made in the form of 300 equal payments at 6% interest. Blah 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 blah. Signed, Jay Monroe on date. This is technically equivalent to cash. And most of us understand that our loan agreements have this type of language in it. Okay, so it's not really a loan agreement. It's a promissory note, which is equivalent to cash. Then we dive into aspects that banks don't loan their own money. Banks don't loan their own money, and you can see this in the Federal Reserve Bank. You can see this in the Modern Money Mechanics. You can see this in 12 U.S.C. 411. You can see this in the aspect of 12 U.S.C. 1431, where it talks about the powers and duties of banks, how they borrow and give security. So it never really says that they loan their own money. It just says that they borrow money and they give it. Okay. And then the other aspect based off the aftermath of House Joint Resolution 192 is that the signature creates the credit now. Okay. Your signature has value in the United States. All right. And this is probably going to be one of the key differences in comparison to other countries. All right. So we talk about the U.S. frames and debt discharge, but we just went through this relatively quickly so that we can kind of just brush up on those things and see the concepts and how they're going to kind of differ from other countries. Now, let's talk about UK debt laws. Let's talk about the Canadian system. Let's talk about the European Union frameworks and really just do this and really contrast them at the end. Okay. Now, on the UK side, the UK has debt relief laws, okay, and they kind of have it through what's called a debt relief order, okay. And how their debt relief order is, it freezes debt repayments and interest for a set period, often 12 months, with debts potentially being written off if finances don't improve. So it's kind of more on the aspect of like forbearance. If anybody knows what forbearance is when you get like a couple months push back on like your mortgage or whatever the case may be, and they kind of just like reset the payments. It's almost the same exact way. And what I'm gathering from the debt relief order is the fact that if it comes to a place where after the 12 months you can't pay it, then it gets written off. Okay. Then they have what's called an individual voluntary arrangement. And an individual voluntary arrangement, and this is in the UK, is a formal agreement between a person facing debt difficulty and their creditor, offering a way to repay debts over a set period, often 5 to 6 years. It could be an alternative to bankruptcy, allowing a debtor to retain assets like a home. Okay. IVAs are supervised by an insolvency practitioner who manages the payments to the creditors. Okay. So on the UK side, they have what's called these IVAs, and it's the agreement between you and the creditor. So all my UK people is going to be a lot of what I'm seeing is going to be on the aspect of an arrangement that you kind of create, and you can communicate with the debt collector. Obviously we'll have to dive a little bit deeper on you guys' rights, but I'm about to talk about some of the things that may be a little bit similar to what we have. Now, they also have statutory write-offs where, let's just say if, a debt, passes a statutory period. And again, I don't know if it's like this in every single part of the UK, probably all over. I don't know how it goes, whether it's, I won't even say it, but things can get written off based off of the, statutory, arrangements, periods. Okay. And if it gets written off, I would assume that it follows the same exact angle of something being written off means that that person has been made whole. Okay. Now, here's one thing that the UK doesn't have is that administrative discharge that we have in the United States, because it's most likely insolvency based. Okay. Now, when it comes to insolvency, okay, it says that insolvency in the UK refers to the state where a company cannot pay its debts when they are due. It's a legal process, not just a financial one, with different procedures depending on whether it's a company, corporate insolvency, or individual personal insolvency. For companies, the main focus is often trying to rescue the business, or if that's not possible, winding up the company's affairs and distributing assets to the creditor. So I'm assuming it's more of it says a procedure where the administrator is appointed to take over the company's management and try to rescue the business or the best possible outcome for the creditors. So I'm assuming it's going to be on the situation where, okay, it says right here, a process where a company's assets are sold off to pay creditors and the company is ultimately dissolved. There you have it. They'll actually, make the decision for you, is what I'm gathering. They'll appoint somebody to say, okay, bet, well, we're going to see what we can try to do, whether we're going to come up with some DROs, whether we're going to come up with some arrangements. But if we can't, we're going to go ahead and make some sales. We're going to go ahead and make the decision for you. Okay. Which is very interesting. I think that it really does take the power out of the consumer's hand. Okay. So here are some of the key differences. The focus is more on court structure, repayments, and forgiveness. Remember, forgiveness is more of like asking for permission. And it has no choice but to go through a court. Okay. There's also less trust or commercial law framing. So they don't have like commercial regulators. I think that the government really takes more control in this space. And then there's an insolvency service that acts as the regulator, So somebody's going to be appointed to kind of just like make that decision for you. Now, the question is, okay, does it affect credit? Whatever the case may be, I'm sure it does. Okay. And we'll probably have to do a separate video on the UK's credit system, but I'm really doing this for my people that do send me a message and they say, you know what, does this work in the UK? Does this work, in Canada, wherever the case may be? And I could just send them this video. Now, let's talk about how Canada's system is. Okay. So how Canada does theirs, they do more of what's called a consumer proposal. Okay. A consumer proposal and bankruptcy are both debt relief options, but they differ significantly in their impact on assets, credit, and the process. A consumer proposal allows you to repay a portion of your debt over 3 to 5 years, keeping most of your assets, while bankruptcies involves liquidating assets to repay creditors and offers more comprehensive debt relief. So it seems like the consumer proposal is more like an arrangement where you kind of decide how you're going to pay your debts for the next 3 to 5 years. And then obviously bankruptcy is very similar to the bankruptcy that we have in the United States. Okay. If you do the consumer proposal, you're going to have more asset protection. It's going to negatively impact your credit, but it's going to have a shorter effect than bankruptcy. There is debt repayment. The creditor must approve of it. The process, you're going to work with a licensed insolvency trustee. You dig me? And for eligibility, you must be insolvent and have debts between $1,000 and $250K. Okay. And it says that it's an alternative to bankruptcy. It could be a good option if you want to avoid bankruptcy while still addressing your debt issue. So you can't really get away from debt. You're still going to have to find a way to repay it, or this insolvency trustee is going to start making decisions for you. Okay. Let's go ahead and pull up the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act real quick. The Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, enacted in 1985. It says an insolvent person in respect to whom the notice of intention is filed under section 50.4 or a proposal is filed under subsection 62.1 may not sell or otherwise dispose of assets outside of ordinary course of business unless authorized to do so by court. Despite any requirement for the shareholder's approval, including one under federal or provincial law, the court may authorize the sale or deposition even if the shareholder approval was not obtained. So again, it seems like they're going to make, and obviously you can come here and just review this. I'm only just going over this so that you guys can, for my people in Canada, so they can go and take a look at this themselves. But it seems like it is pretty much breaking down what I just talked about already. Okay. And this is just the legal merit behind it. It also talks about how trustees must be licensed insolvency professionals. So back to the fact that you're going to have somebody already making the decisions for you. And then how debt discharge is really in Canada is really based on the government's timeline of things. Okay. So the government is kind of going to make that decision for you based off of their timeline. Now, here's the interesting overlap of things, okay? They have promissory notes and negotiable instruments, okay? But they are not necessarily used for discharge. That's very interesting. And the Canada Revenue Agency, which is very similar to the IRS, where they're going to enforce harshly when it comes to taxes, money, and things of that nature. So that's Canada. Now we're going to talk about just the European Union framework. Debt relief varies by country, but includes the same aspect. In Germany, they have an insolvency process. In France, they have a debt restructuring. Okay. In Greece, it's often tied to EU bailouts and external controls. Okay. Some EU-wide principles are some consumer protection laws. They have a GDPR and a financial privacy. Okay. And the biggest thing that we understand is the fact that there's no unified remedy system like the UCC or the 12 USC like we have in the United States. So it's really based on forgiveness and not really remedy through right. Okay, so you don't really have a right to create your own remedy in those other countries like UK, Europe, or Canada. They kind of are really on the aspect of, hey, you do not have that right. Okay. So it's a couple of things I want to highlight about just this contrast. The first thing is the U.S. offers unique tools that administrative process, which is allowing you to kind of communicate privately with the debt collector. A UCC-based conditional acceptance where you have a right to pretty much challenge a company and say, hey, I'll conditionally accept this offer if you can do X, Y, and Z. And then there's trust instruments for private settlement. And that right there is more allowing you to be more private in your communications with your debt collector. Whereas other countries are more government based, where the government is kind of going to make the decision and oversee everything. You got to have those licensed intermediate, those licensed mediums that's going to kind of also make some decisions for you. And there is no direct power to the consumer in places like the UK, Europe, or I'll just say that the concepts that I talk about here in the United States, in those other countries, they don't have that much of a right. Now, it doesn't change the fact of how, because I've spoken to some people from the UK and Europe and things of that nature, their credit is not as like big as it is in the United States. Okay. So that may be some of the pluses that they have. Okay. And I spoke to someone yesterday who's actually from Czechoslovakia, and I don't know exactly where that is, but I know that's in Europe. He said that, you know, they'll look at like your income. They'll look at the last 2 years of how much money you made, you know, how you've been managing your money, and then they'll approve you based off of that. You don't have, I mean, there is credit, but it's not as like, you can't just go and look for your credit score, at least in Czechoslovakia. Okay. But here's the thing. The U.S. hides the discharge in laws, and other countries bury it in bureaucracy. Okay, so the government is going to control more of the discharge and forgiveness aspects in the UK, Europe, things of that nature. And the US is going to basically hide the fact that you can do it in plain sight. Now, one of the questions one may ask is, okay, well, if you can't discharge debt in those other countries, is the question that they're not using credit or fiat money? That is not the case, okay? Because most of the companies are credit-based. Okay, they do use a fiat money system, but here's the key difference. Okay, all countries use credit, but only some allow private discharge. So most countries, UK, Canada, EU nations. Okay, and I'll pull up this little graph here, see if I can make it bigger. I'll pull up this graph here, make myself a little bit smaller. Most countries use the fractional reserve banking system. So that's pretty much universal. They use credit by signature. They use a fiat currency system, okay, which is debt-based. But not everyone has a EUCC or equivalent for private remedy, okay? Administrative discharge is only available in the United States. Bankruptcy system is available everywhere. But they don't also have trust used for debt offsets. They don't have private citizens that can issue negotiable instruments. They don't have the use of conditional acceptance. Acknowledgement of discharge via signature, and they don't have law mandating remedy. Okay. So that's, if you want to see, just take a quick snapshot of the difference. This is the key difference right here. Okay. So instead of a private side of discharge, they're more focused on the public side. The government really controls a lot of the discharge aspects because they're going to do it through bankruptcy courts. They're going to do it through debt relief agencies. They're going to do it through insolvency professionals. You dig me? Now, the question is, why don't other countries allow private discharge? Well, their systems are more centralized, so only the government can pretty much initiate it. Okay. They don't teach administrative remedy, even if the tools exist like negotiable instruments or trust, and they are not used for debt forgiveness. Okay. They also rely on court-driven processes, so everything goes through a public insolvency or court restructuring, often with long waiting periods. And they suppress the private side. They don't want you to be private in those countries. They don't want you to maneuver that way. Okay. They want you to go through them. Okay. Even though they use your signature to be able to make the fiat or create the credit, they don't acknowledge your right to offset the debt with that same exact energy like they do in the United States. But the U.S. is different because they passed House Joint Resolution 192, which removed gold-backed security and introduced discharge via credit. They also are the only country that allow a private citizen, okay, to use the UCC, conditional acceptance, and trust for remedy. They also are the only country that acknowledges your signature creating credit, and the system is built around the idea that discharging is your remedy, but you have to know how to claim it. So the importance of this video today, yes, we can talk about the differences, and also for my UK, the people who are in Europe, the people who are in other countries, to help them see some of the key differences, because there's some people who watch my video and say, well, damn, can I do this in my country? And just a simple Google search, you'll be able to find a little bit pieces here. Okay, can I do debt discharge in my country? Can I do debt relief, or what are my debt relief options in my country? But I wanted to break that down. But one of the things I wanted to break down, especially for my people that are in the U.S., is that you really do have it good. Okay. Some of us complain about where we're at in life, or that, this system is rigged. But there's other countries that literally make it hard for you to don't even give you a right to do the things that we do. Okay. You can complain and say, oh, I want to do this, I want to live here, I want to live there. And by all means, if you do, then do that. Some people, they're going to think that they're going to be able to get away from debt or credit, fiat, and all of that because they leave the United States. No, it's in everywhere. I've spoken to people that say, man, it's just too expensive here. I want to go live in Europe. It's like, what do you think is going to change? What do you think, you're not going to have to pay debt? What you think, you're not going to have to spend money? You know what I mean? So this is why it's important to just learn the system that you're in, because you're going to go to another system and have less rights. Okay? At least for the things that we can do here. And I think that in the United States, this is one of the places where you can probably become the wealthiest the fastest. Okay? Which is why even people from the UK come to the United States and build businesses, because they know that they're going to make a lot of money in the United States. They know they can pull out credit and discharge it versus in their country. Okay. And again, I'm not like a big advocate of, oh, America this, America that. I don't really care. You go wherever you feel like you're comfortable. Dig me? But just understand the system that you're in. Understand, what is, the truth, so that you're not just making decisions based off of emotions. Stop being emotional. You dig me? Yeah. You may not be happy that Trump is president or whatever the case may be, but yeah, just learn. But understand that wherever you're at, though, every country has its own form of forgiveness. Okay? But only in the U.S. you can be a private system and exercise private administrative process. And if you study, okay, you can be able to enforce and discharge debt administratively through codes. So it's a superpower that we have in the United States that other countries don't have. So be grateful, you dig me, in exactly what it is that the system that you're in, and just study, do your due diligence. All right. Now, for this video specifically, I just wanted to be able to highlight those things. If you want to learn more about debt discharge so that you can have full confidence in the process, down below there is the Complete That Guide. The Complete That Guide is pretty much going to break down some of these concepts, give you resources and templates, and it will go hand in hand with the YouTube videos, okay? If I don't talk about it in my YouTube videos, it's probably not in the Complete That Guide. So getting people that will DM me and ask me questions about concepts I don't even talk about, like I'll get people that ask me, okay, you know, about, you know, the getting money from your birth certificate. I have one video talking about that, and if you watch that video, I answered that question. Okay, some people are trying to get a billion dollar credit, and it's like I don't even talk about that in my YouTube videos. Now I may, but that's on the theoretical side, which I typically try to steer away from so that people don't get confused. So tap in with the Complete That Guide down below. Number two, if you want to work with me one-on-one, my mentorship will be down below. If you want to follow me on Instagram so that you can get updates and be able to connect with me on a more personal level, it's at biz.nick down below. If you want to follow me on Twitch, we are going live and doing these breakdowns early. As you can see, you were probably watching this at 8:30 today, but I went live earlier today, or right now at 10 o'clock Eastern time, and I decided to go live and do this breakdown live. So it's best if you are the one who you know, taps into the Twitch, and maybe you can be able to get your questions answered. Okay. And my last question is, have you ever tried to discharge debt in the US? Drop your experience in the comment section. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on the post notification, because this isn't just about money, it's about freedom. If you got all the way to the end, comment the word discharge, and I'll see you in the next one.